Welcome to the Iowa Veterans Network, where we will try to connect veterans, companies, and supporters to each other and supply information to make better sense of the military and civilian worlds. This is Frank Spizzetto, host of this new channel dedicated to engaging conversations. Thank you for checking us out. Good morning. Today we have Becky Coady. She's the state chair for the employer support for the Guard and Reserve, also known as the ESGR. So good morning, Becky. And how's your day going? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Good morning, Frank. You know, it's only 8:45, so it's fabulous morning so far. The sun is shining. I love that, especially after having so much rain. So I serve as a state chair for ESGR, Employers for the Guard and Reserve, and I've been in that role now for 4.5 years or so. So as state chair, my primary role is to ensure that as a state, that we comply or are performing our top 3 missions. So ESGR, our primary role is actually educating, and we do that through our military outreach, employer outreach, and ombudsman programming. So what does military outreach look like? So we have volunteers that are assigned to units across the state of Iowa, which we have, I think, approximately 50 some.
Wow.
And those volunteers, their primary role is to ensure that our Guard and reservists understand USERRA, Uniform Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. A huge mouthful, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, we encourage them to go in once a quarter to their units and just ensure that our service members just understand what USERRA means, and that, you know, what may be a personal conflict with the manager isn't a USERRA issue.
Yeah.
However, if we have employers that are saying, well, if you're going to go on military duty for your annual training for 2 weeks, you're going to have to use your vacation time. That is a violation of USERRA. I mean, that's a very, they do not have to do that. They can choose to, but they don't have to. All right. So in the event that there's a challenge, that a service member's issue is actually a USERRA violation, then that volunteer would turn it over to an ombudsman.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
We also encourage our service members that if they have fabulous employers who go above and beyond the USERRA law, that they nominate them for the very basic Patriot Award. And any employer that's nominated for the Patriot Award receives that Patriot Award. Which is a really nice, simple way just to acknowledge that my employer follows the law. They encourage me to continue my military duty. They support me, acknowledge me, whatever that looks like, but they do what they can to ensure that they're supporting me and my family.
Yeah.
And we also have a spousal award as well, that a spouse can nominate their employer for their support while their military member's away.
That's pretty cool. And that seems to be pretty important right now, because correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like there's a lot more Guard and Reserve that being activated as of late. So I can see from the employer side, there could be some challenges with that. But for the employers who choose to say, listen, we're in it, this is my team member, they're a valuable member of my team, I'm going to do all I can to support them, being able to recognize those companies, that's pretty cool.
That is really, really cool. And that's probably one of the favorite things in my role to do as state chair. But even when I was a volunteer just volunteering as a generalist across the state. I love that opportunity to just say thank you to our employers, because one of the things that I think is lost in translation many times is employers aren't always, they don't recognize the impact they have on our national defense, right? So one of my messages is to employers is, hey, don't forget that because you hire and when you hire Guard reservists, that you're also an extremely vital person and entity in our nation's defense. Because without your support, employer support, our Guard reservists can't do the mission that they also love doing besides working for them, right?
It's a teamwork. It's a team effort.
Yep. Teamwork. And we're a shared workforce. And in a time where, depending what industry you're in right now, when workforce is a vital need in so many of our industries yet, and I know we're hearing a lot of different egg manufacturers in particular that are laying people off. It's so very, very important that our employers understand their role
Yeah.
in our defense.
It's not like you have a part-time job. This is my full-time job. This is my part-time job. When I was in the National Guard, and that's a full-time job. I mean, it's not full-time unless you get deployed, but it is two full-time jobs, and you got to figure out how to get that balance.
And especially as service members, your best employee typically is probably also the best employee for the Guard or reserves, right? And they're going to continue to advance just like in your company in their role in the military. So that support is so extremely important. And that leads me to our employer outreach mission then. So on the employer outreach side, our volunteers and our organization strive to partner with Guard and Reserve units to invite employers into those units and help them understand what that armored military entity does within their community. Since 9/11, when all our armories were closed because of that fear of terror attacks at home in our communities, that separated then that unit from the community. And it's amazing to me as I travel around Iowa how many local community members don't even realize they have an armory in their community. Oh, yeah. An example of that would be Oskaloosa. It's a smaller armory. And from what I understand, they haven't had a lot of interaction in the community. And somebody I was talking to in Oskaloosa about the Guard and Reserves and ESGR said, well, I don't think we have an armory in Oskaloosa. I said, yeah, you do. So I brought up my map of Oskaloosa and I said, this is where it's at. And she's like, I drive by that every day and I never noticed it. Right. So that's the importance of, especially in rural Iowa, that we get out and partner with the Guard and Reserves and help that community understand you still have an entity here. Yeah. You know what? And they want to get to know you as well and become more engaged and more involved. Fortunately, the Guard, especially in the Reserves, want to rebuild those relationships, and we've become much more involved in that community engagement piece, which is fabulous because we have a shared interest in educating and informing our employers. And then we also offer free USERRA training to any employer that wants to have that for their managers and supervisors, because it's well known that the CEO president level, they're going to do everything they can to support, right? And their message is that. However, when you get to the production side and those managers and supervisors, those are the folks that don't understand the law. Yeah. They don't know that they can't tell that service member, military employee, you have to use your vacation time, right? So this is how we can also add more value to our employer outreach side, is we can train you and especially your supervisor managers. And then we also offer that if employer is revising their HR policy, right? And they want to add additional benefits
That's neat.
above what USERRA requires, that we can advise them on what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. Ultimately, the employer makes that choice, but we can just kind of give some advice on, yeah, that language sounds good or it doesn't sound good, or even if what they put in their policy is violating USERRA,
Yeah.
you know.
That's
So,
interesting stuff because you don't know what you don't know. And if I've learned
right.
anything through talking with you in the past or anybody else from ESGR, even other organizations, when you think, I'm pretty sure this is how this works. Well, when you get down to the letters and the dots and the T's, crossing up, you get into the nuts and bolts of it all, you start to find out, wait a minute, there's more to it than what you think. And
Yeah.
having a resource like you and the SGR is God, it's got to be huge for employers to make that simpler to say, hey, I don't know what I don't know. Can you help me?
But our biggest challenge, Frank, is that the fact that we've been around for 51 years as an organization.
Wow.
And yet, I'm still amazed by how many employers, even service members, more side on the reserve side, that don't know that we exist.
Yeah.
So to me, that's very challenging for me in so many ways. So, as state chair, I always hope, especially through these community outreach events, that our message is getting spread more widely.
Is there an ESGR in every state or is it just an Iowa thing? Is there a national group?
We're actually funded by the Department of Defense.
Oh, wow.
So every state has an ESGR program. Every state has a state chair and a number of volunteers that support the mission. Even our U.S. territories like Puerto Rico and Guam, et cetera, have ESGR programs.
Wow, I didn't realize that. So if I'm a reserve and I had a family member who she's in the reserve and she kept having scheduling issues, and when she had a 4-day weekend, they said no. They put her on the schedule, and of course, she didn't go to work. She went to her reserve. Uh, but I mean, it really caused issues, and I tried to encourage her on what to do and who to contact. How if I'm a reserve or a guard member and I think I'm having some issues with my employer. How do I reach out? What do I do?
Well, if you go to the esgr.mil website
Yeah.
and then there's a state tab, you can actually select the state then that you work in, because our boundaries are actually about where you work,
Okay.
right? If you have an employer issue. So you may drill in Omaha or Nebraska, but you work in Council Bluffs, as an example.
Okay.
You'd have to contact Iowa if your employer's in Council Bluffs, Iowa, to help resolve any issues or challenges that you may have it. But when you go to that website, you select the state of where you work, and then you find the phone number for the full-time staff, contact them, and they can help guide you to either the USERRA website section of esgr.mil or connect you with our ombudsman. Now, every state, how they do business is a little bit different. So my goals with ESGR and especially for any cases is talk to our ombudsman first, because maybe you can resolve it as a service member on your own just by getting the section of the law that pertains to your issue,
Yeah.
right? But they may also advise you that, especially if you were fired, you need to do a formal case. So we have two separate things, cases and inquiries. So
Gotcha.
inquiries are much more valuable, in my opinion, because that service member is trying to resolve it at their level. When it becomes a formal case, then there's a lot more legalese that go into that, and our volunteers, ombudsman, then have to do a formal investigation.
And that's when they call Becky and you come storming in with your big stick and start fixing things, right?
Nope, we don't
No.
use the big stick. No, no, no. And again, that's where education
Yeah.
primarily comes into play, right? So our ombudsman, their primary role is to look at both sides. Did that service member um, properly inform their employer of their drill weekend or military service time, right?
Yeah, because
And
I
when
think,
we say properly informed, what does that mean?
yes. Tell us what
Right?
I was about to ask, because I've heard of it, that the guard member doesn't do something.
Right. So the law states that informing is verbal or written. They are not required to give notice months in advance, weeks in advance, or days in advance. There's no timeline. Technically, a service member can give their notice an hour before they have to show up for work, and they're covered by you, Sarah. I personally think that that's wrong,
Yeah,
especially when they've known most likely for over a year what their drill calendar was.
yeah,
Where it comes into play that by only giving verbal notification is who else was around when you gave that notification, because that supervisor could say, no, you never said anything to me, right? So in the event that, which actually my husband's a military outreach representative, and he got a phone call last week about this happening, that the service member gave verbal notification, and now the business or the employer is saying you didn't give notification, so we don't have to bring you back, right?
yeah.
So, it's always, always, always better to give a written, whether that's a handwritten note, and make a copy of it for yourself and who you gave it to. You can give copy of your orders. You don't have to, but it's something that is an added protection, especially when you return back to work. Technically, those orders don't have to be provided until after service is complete. But if you have them, give them. When you have that annual drill schedule, give it to them right away. Don't wait.
Yeah, it seems like just respect both ways, right? So if respect your employer, if you want to come back and remain in good standing, don't leave them in a lurch whenever possible, obviously. But so if I'm an employer and I'm struggling with the team member, how do I find out? Do I go to the same website, or is there a different way me as an employer could say, like, I don't know if I'm having issues or not?
Yep, go to the same website, contact that full-time staff. They'll get you again in contact with an ombudsman to walk through what's going on. And honestly, businesses or employers have the opportunity. They can call the unit directly and say, hey, I just want to confirm that these orders are correct or this military time is correct. Service members unit is not going to lie for them.
Yeah, no, they're not.
So,
And that's another great way. Like you said, in Oskaloosa, you have an armory there, and obviously that those all those soldiers work somewhere. If they're partnering up anyway, if they're going out on an extended leave, I've seen
mhm.
people show up and drop off donuts in the morning. Nothing better for a guard member when you're getting ready to head off to your weekend or your 2 week long training for a box of donuts to show up from your employer. I never would have turned that away. But I mean, I'm just saying, there's a lot of
Yep.
that teamwork, like you said earlier, that an employer could really be a part of rather than just being this sideline piece.
So there's two fears out there sometimes. So military member sometimes fear giving notice too far in advance because they, for some reason, feel that there would be a negative repercussion from it.
Yeah.
When in reality, giving a late notice is going to be harder and more difficult for that employer than that short term or very short notice, right? But then on the employer side, there's that fear on, can I ask them about their military service,
Hmm.
right? Can I ask questions? Can I get, just get to know them a little bit better and their military duty? And I think that we need to fix that barrier of fear, that the service member should be chatting with their supervisor manager about how, hey, this is what I did on drill weekend. I just want to let you know that, or when we have boss lift events or civic leader events, that they're inviting their employer to participate in that. So they know what they're doing at annual training or at the unit.
I think the great way to wrap up our conversation, tell what the boss lift. You went there, you mentioned it. I've seen those events. Tell us what are those, and how would somebody get involved?
We'll have two types of events. We've got the civic leader event, which is a community oriented, where we bring business leaders, regardless if they hire or not, to that armory, so they get to know what that armory is. And if we're lucky, we may have a Black Hawk or Chinook come in and also give them a military flight.
Wow.
And that's an awareness, community awareness, so that the community understands this is what that armory or unit is about, what their mission is. And then we have the boss lift, where we actually take unit members or service member employers, their bosses, up to annual training. We just did one to Camp Ripley, Minnesota a couple weeks ago, and we had about 37 employers that participated in that, and they got to see annual training and the fact that, number one, their meals aren't that awesome. They haven't showered for 8 days or whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
So, it's just an opportunity to educate two different types of people. Employers that actually hire service members, and then community awareness.
It's amazing what the ESGR does. And I got a little certificate, saying, hey, you support the ESGR, and anybody organization can come to an event and get one of those. It's a great organization. And you in particular and several of your team are just fabulous. I run into you all the time out there talking to people, educating, which is the big piece. That's a really, really big piece. So if anybody gets anything from this little chat, reach out, go find out, learn and educate yourself, and use those resources that are out there.
You bet. We'd love to have conversations with anybody. And I particular really, really enjoy helping educate both sides.
Awesome. Well, I really do appreciate you getting on here today, Becky, and you have a great week, and enjoy this weather we got.
Well, thank you so much for having me and giving me the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for taking time to sit with us, and I look forward to catching up with you at a network event somewhere along the road.